Okay, hi. I wanted to do another controversial video on trigger warnings and triggers in a general sense. So what people have been doing is making trigger warnings into something like you can't really handle anything because you need a trigger warning, or triggers are like very mild things, like if somebody calls me ugly, I'm like triggered and need to go lay down and cry myself to sleep or something. I don't really get why we've blown it out of proportion so much, but what I really wanted to talk about is what a real trigger warning and what a real trigger is. So let's use for this example a guy who's been in the military for a very long time. He's a war veteran, and he has severe PTSD because he was in the war. So his PTSD would be around his war time and things that he was in a life or death situation, and it was very scary and traumatic. And when you have PTSD or something similar, what happens when you're triggered is you go back to that exact time, you like have a really bad memory almost of that time, and your body puts you into a false state of panic, which means your body thinks that it's in a life or death situation when it really isn't. So what triggers people to do things is what triggers them to be in a panic state or a life or death situation state. This can happen, of course, with people who weren't in the military at all. People have PTSD for other reasons. People have generalized anxiety disorders, all sorts of things. But usually it isn't because somebody called them ugly. If that's your big problem, then you need to really sort that out. But for that guy, for a person who was in the war, it might as well be that he hears something that sounds like a bomb sound. And so he immediately is put back into that state, and his mind clicks, and he's triggered. He's triggered into a different state of mind where he thinks he's in a life or death situation when he really isn't. It's a very psychological thing, but it still happens. And that's what being triggered means. It just means that you are put into a false state of fight or flight response, which wasn't needed at that time. And a trigger warning is if somebody were going to talk graphically about war or graphically about all of that's what's happening, maybe in a video or in a book or something, they would put a trigger warning so that person doesn't immediately go back into that fight or flight response from what the person said. This isn't like a necessity. I definitely don't see it as a necessity. People don't have to do this. I'm not going to get angry at people for not putting a trigger warning on something, but I feel like it's just helpful for the society in general, especially for those people who are really struggling with their PTSD. It really helps them to be able to manage it better, but it's definitely not mandatory. And it's just kind of courteous to those who are struggling with something that's really deep ingrained into them. So that's basically all it is. It's just people who have certain issues with certain things, and it being brought up and they being put into false fight or flight. So it could be caused by almost anything. Like, you could be triggered by like a cucumber, but I don't think you should put trigger warnings on everything, because basically everything in the entire world could be a trigger to somebody. But you need to focus on like the main things that it doesn't necessarily need to be said. Like, if you're going to talk about showering, I mean, most everybody showers. That's a pretty normal thing. It's day to day, but talking about war or talking about sexual violence or domestic abuse, it's not very normal. It's not a thing that comes up in regular conversation. So making sure that people who aren't expecting it don't randomly just get hit with it is just kind of courteous in several ways. But society has taken it now to an extreme where, like, I've seen posts that have a trigger warning for saying homosexual or something, or talking about cisgender people too much, to where they make cis seem normal or something. Nobody is probably triggered by that, it probably upsets them, but it's not putting them into a full state of fight or flight, into a panic attack. And if it is, then that's a regular everyday thing. People talk about straight people getting married and cis people having lives. That shouldn't be a trigger for you. And if it is, you really need to work on that, because that's just real life. That's not people censoring for you. That would mean people need to censor the entire world. Like, you need to know when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, and that it's not a forced thing. Nobody needs to put trigger warnings on everything. It's just a courteous thing. You shouldn't expect it from people, because this is a free speech world. Everybody can do and say what they want to say, and if they try to protect you from that, that's just courteous. It's not mandatory. And if you're making it mandatory, you're stifling free speech into a bubble of what is safe and what is what you want. I don't want people to be rude to other people or hurt other people's feelings or be harassing people or anything, but that comes with freedom of speech. That's just how it is. And that might make some people angry, but that's how it is. If you want freedom of speech to say what you want to say, then you have to make sure everybody else can say what they want to say too. Okay? And I'll see you later. I'll probably be talking about, I don't know, something else controversial next time. See ya!